What's up, everybody? Welcome to the second edition of the Shot 3 from the Tee podcast. And that's probably, honestly, the worst couple of words that you can read on Shot Tracker if you're a golfer, if you're following your golfer along. And it's something that I can tell you I do on a weekly basis. I'm sure a lot of you do as well. And when you see that shot 1 from the tee box for a while, and then all of a sudden it says shot 3 from the tee, your guy is not looking like he's going to have a goat hole. So starting you off with a little bit of techno music. We are in Vegas. It is the club scene, so might as well start you off with a little bit of that. But we are here, and honestly, I had a pretty good showing as we start off this podcast with the top 5 breakdown. Last night, if you didn't listen to my opening tee podcast, I give you the top 5 pricing of DraftKings before they come out, well before the odds come out. Hey, sometimes I'm going to be right, sometimes I'm going to be wrong. This time, not too bad. I got 4 out of the 5 in position correctly, and I nailed Brooks' price at 11.7. Cantlay, I was 200 off. They placed him actually down $100. Bryson, they priced at 10.7, third on the board. I had him at 10.8, third on the board. And then they went a little bit cheaper than I thought they were going to. I thought they'd have a little bit of a closer gap between Bryson and Webb. They did not. Webb comes in at 10.2. And as I mentioned last night, I thought it was either going to be Scott and Finau or Finau-Scott. It ended up going Scott-Finau, Scott at 10, and Finau at 9.8. So pretty good showing, for all intents and purposes. Hopefully, eventually, I'll get 5 of 5, but 4 of 5, not too bad, not too shabby. So let's head to the field changes. Only a couple today, which is kind of surprising. I guess it is a fall circuit event, so maybe a lot of the guys aren't going to drop out or add in. But we did have one late add. Grayson Murray, who must be playing on a major medical right now, would be my guess, because I don't understand how he would have preference over a guy like Rain Gibson, who is coming off of the Korn Ferry Tour graduates. But that is who Grayson Murray bumped out with his late entry. Missed the cut last week. Cam Percy gets in via a top 10 last week, so he was obviously part of the reshuffle. He wouldn't have gotten in with this field. However, he knocks Nelson Ledesma out as Cam Percy gets in. However, Nelson Ledesma gets right back in as Ben Martin had to drop out. Ledesma replaces him. So just a couple. So really just 2 moves. Cam Percy in, Grayson Murray in, Rain Gibson out, Ben Martin out. So that's what we have so far. Open qualifiers last week. Moving on to our next section, the open qualifying section, as part of our field changes. I'm going to review just because I want you guys to see how some of these Monday qualifiers perform. And starting off with Byron Math, the 26-year-old from San Diego, did not get it done, sadly. Missed the cut. Andres Gonzalez as well. John Oda, however, the 23-year-old from Hawaii, who had a bad year on the Korn Ferry Tour, actually headed into the weekend with a good chance. He was in the top 10. Failed on Saturday. Bounced back a little bit on Sunday. Had a decent finish, though. Got a nice paycheck. Jin Ho Chung graduated from Oregon 2018, playing the mini tours. He was not even close. And as I suspected, Brandon Harkins was the last man out of that playoff, the way they listed it on the site. So definitely just interesting to see. John Oda, one of the 4 that made the cut last week. Okay, sorry about that. Just had to get together a couple of things there. All right, so on to the Monday qualifiers. We had a huge playoff for a couple of spots there. That's what I was looking at, just to make sure they didn't update it, and they actually had updated. So anyways, Andrew Novak, a 24-year-old from Raleigh, he finished, he was on the Webb.com tour last year, had a decent year, not anything great, but he is from Raleigh. He was the medalist, along with Dylan Wu, a 23-year-old from Oregon, who finished 72nd on the Korn Ferry Tour last year. So not bad. Had a second place at the Lincoln Land Championship as his best start. So, getting back to Novak, he finished 62nd on the Korn Ferry Tour last year, playing in 25 events, making 14 cuts. However, yikes, only 1 top 10. So 7 top 25. So half of his starts finished in the top 25, but only 1 finished in the top 10. So obviously his upside was a bit limited last year. Then there was a, 8 for 2 playoff that included guys like Roberto Diaz, Seamus Power. But the 2 spots went to 2 hot products right now. Isaiah Celina, who we saw make his pro debut last week from Stanford, just helped Stanford win the national championship, made the cut, ended up having a pretty good start. And then John Oda, who Monday qualified last week. So we're talking back-to-back Monday qualifiers. And here's the nice thing about John Oda as well. I believe he lives in the area now. He's from Hawaii, but lives in the area. Went to UNLV. So certainly something to be had here with John Oda, looking for a breakthrough and possibly a couple of more starts here on the PGA Tour. So certainly a couple of guys I'll be looking at for the Open qualifying this week. Then we go into sponsors exemptions. Got a couple this week. Got Kurt Kitayama, who made waves last year at the beginning, almost during this time, actually, for the European Tour. Now, he's a younger guy. If you follow the European Tour at all, he's actually really good friends with David Lipsky, and they actually all live, when they're not traveling in Europe, they all live in Vegas, from what I remember reading and seeing. Excuse me. So, definitely an interesting one here. I'm actually surprised that David Lipsky didn't get the bid as well, or the sponsor exemption as well. Maybe he wants to play in the Open de España, which is going on, of course, on the European Tour this week. So Kurt Kitayama scores a sponsor exemption. It was late, just announced today. So obviously the request had been put in and didn't get told. But Kurt Kitayama certainly coming in off pretty good form, off of 3 straight made cuts. Back-to-back top 25s as well. So I mentioned where he went on that huge streak. He won, he won the Asia Bank Meredith Open, which is coming up here, week 48, so not too far away, and then won again about 8 weeks later at the Oman Open, 9 weeks later at the Oman Open. So certainly has found some good golf during this time of the year, and seems to be trending in form. So Kurt Kitayama on my radar this week. Second sponsor exemption, Akshay Bhatia, who's the 17-year-old out of, from California, but now lives in Raleigh as well, the Raleigh, North Carolina area. He was on the No Laying Up podcast this week. Really, really good podcast that I listened to with Akshay this week. Really enjoyed it very much. I think he makes the cut this week. Speaking of that, I think he makes the cut this week and will be his first made cut as a pro. Next one is Chase Kefka, Brooks' younger brother. Be interesting to see the reception that he gets around the golf Twitter world, as he's really been out of form almost the last year. He's struggling on the Challenge Tour, which is the Korn Ferry Tour of the European. Just had a terrible year, really tanked. Started the year ranked around 700 in the world, and now he's ranked out at almost 1900. So Chase Kefka looking for a spark here this week. Playing, I don't think they live in the area, but certainly they've played it well. Last time we saw him was at the Honda World Invitational on the Challenge Tour, and he missed the cut. So really struggling. A couple more guys. Jack Tent. We'll come back to him in a second. And Maverick McNeely and Rob Oppenheim get the sponsors exemption from the Korn Ferry Tour Finals, which have 2 a week, I believe. So looks like okay. Yep. So Trent is UNLV junior. So that makes total sense. He must have won something to get him in here, but regardless, goes to UNLV. Looks like he had a pretty decent season too. Never know what can happen, especially playing a course that he probably plays quite a bit. Certainly interesting. So Jack Trent, a junior at UNLV, is the last sponsor exemption. So instead of this week, normally here what I do is talk a little bit about the field, but this week I have Matt Jones at Matt Jones TFR joining me for a little statistical breakdown. Hopefully it'll be a recurring regular thing. So that's about 13 minutes that we're going to do here. It's already obviously recorded if I'm able to tell you that. And we're about 10 minutes in, so right on that 25-minute mark. However, I'm going to go into the opening odds discussion at least. where I'm going to give you, as I said every week, I'm going to give you one pick from under 25 to 1, one pick from 40 to 100 to 1, and one pick from over 100 to 1. This is just dealing really with odds. I'll put in the DraftKings salary if you'd like me to in the future, but really just giving 3 odds picks. And so I always like to try and recap it at least a little bit, right? If nobody holds me accountable, who's going to? So last week, obviously, we talked about Cantlay. Didn't end up doing that good. Talked about Roger Sloane, who we're going to talk about a little bit later. Not bad. He made the cut at least. So we will keep a little bit more of a statistical accuracy here going forward. I don't know why it looked like my thing saved over before I came in. I apologize. So the one pick under this week, well, he's sitting right at 26 to 1, 25 to 1 where you look. And that's Collin Morikawa. I mean, I know he just won the Barracuda Championship not too long ago, but the stats look so good again. It looks like this course is set up really well for him. I've talked a lot about how I believe his game is a very, very good parallel to Patrick Cantlay, who won here and came in second here. So love Collin Morikawa at 26 to 1, 25 to 1. So we'll say 25 to 1. He'll be my pick under 25. Double that price, though, which kind of blows my mind, especially on a course that has relatively wide fairways, easy to hit greens. Matthew Wolff, 50 to 1 coming in this week. I'm very interested at that price. Having just won not too long ago, can get pretty good on top 10, and I like Matt Wolff a lot this week. Last one's going to be more of a course fit play, and that's JJ Spawn. Had a chance to win the Patrick Cantlay here before absolutely tanking on the last 6 holes, I believe it was. He comes in at 125 to 1, maybe a little shorter, but has found okay form, made 2 of the last 3 cuts here in the fall swing, so not too bad. Hopefully that will give you a good start. So I will, what I'm going to do is just kick off the end of the pod here and bring in Matt as the recorded portion of this. It's probably a little bit easier for continuity purposes and for just for overall flow of the podcast. So right at about 13 minutes, we're going to be about 26 minutes on this, and since we are going clubbing, as we are in Vegas, baby, this week, we are going to leave you off with a little bit of more techno to end the night. And, of course, I'll give my one little plug that I do. If you're not already an Awesemo.com Plus member, great time to do so. Use promo code ROSLIN, all capitals, to get half off your first subscription package that you decide to do there. Again, we got plenty of content, even though it's the fall swing. My normal co-host there, Ben Raza, puts out, of course, his article, does the show on Tuesday, and of course does the show on Wednesday with me, does the show on Tuesday with at Fantasy Golf Man, Timothy Frank, a great and fun show to catch Tuesday afternoons, and of course Ben and I live before lock on Wednesday evenings. But this week we've got a special guest, the reigning big GPP champion of golf and football, for that matter. He didn't win the million, but he won plenty on FanDuel. But he did win the big GPP on DraftKings for golf last week. The man behind the mask, I guess maybe not behind the mask, but Alex Baker at Pga Dfs, a buddy of mine, and of course maybe my boss as well. I'll mention him in the next segment as well a little bit. He's going to be joining Ben and I on Wednesday for a little bit to talk about how he got to the lineup he got to that won him the $50K top prize. So look forward to that, and thanks everybody for joining for the second edition of the Shot 3 from the Tee podcast. All right, so we're on to the second part of the Shot 3 from the Tee podcast. This is episode 2. Got a nice piece of advice from a hopefully not former, fellow listener that said I need to shorten the name of the podcast, as I talked about on the top. So done that, and now I'm bringing in a buddy of mine from the DFS golf Twitter world, Matt Jones, and you can find him at Matt Jones, T as in Tom, F as in Frank, R as in Robert, Matt Jones TFR at Twitter. He does a bunch of stuff. He does mainly football right now, but when it's not football, he is heavy into golf. So Matt, welcome to the pod. Thank you. He's going to be talking about some statistical stuff and a few other things with me. So Matt, why don't you tell the crowd what you're up to these days?
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. Right now I'm over at RotoViz and Sharp Football doing some DFS stuff for them, and I'm floating in and out of the golf world during football season. Like you said, it's my first love, but football is pretty time consuming this time of year. So
Yeah, I totally understand, and we got our buddy Alex Baker, my boss, so to speak, over here at Awesemo, and he said the same thing to me, but yet he pulls in the GPP last week, the $8, so plenty of golf still to be won during football season, right?
Oh, for sure.
So, good. Well, as I said at the top, Matt's going to be joining me for the statistical portion of this podcast, and one of the main reasons why I'm bringing him in here is because he takes much more of an analytical approach to the game, and I love to mirror that in with what I do. If you guys follow me, of course I look at the strokes gained data, but I try to go more off a feel, which sometimes it helps, sometimes it hurts. And I mentioned on the top of the pod yesterday that I'm looking at 2 statistics this week, and I'm sure Matt might have a 1 or 2 more for you guys to focus on as we march on. But the 2 that I ironed out were strokes gained on the approach and proximity from 50 to 125 yards. And if you missed last night's pod, the reason being is because it looks like the last 3 winners, it just doesn't matter about their proximity from 200 yards. And of course, proximity is not the greatest stat to be looking at anyways, but certainly wedge is a premium here at TPC Summerlin. So did your initial analysis point to what I had found last night?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Most people, I feel like, try to kind of zone in on an off the tee stat, but for when you pointed it out, I looked it up, and proximity from 50 to 125 yards is actually has a stronger correlation to DraftKings scoring than driving distance does at this course, which is, I would say, pretty rare. It definitely jumped off the page to me. So it's something that I'm glad you brought up.
Yeah, and we've seen with a couple of at least the winners in the last couple of years, including Rod Pampling and Patrick Cantlay, Bryson DeChambeau, they're not short by any stretch, right? But they're not in the top 10. They're not a Brooks Kefka, or anything like that in driving distance. So obviously it certainly, can still help you here. But why do you think that is? Do you think just because we're in the desert, the ball travels longer anyway, or do you think it's just more course setup?
I think it's probably a combination of the two. At this course we have larger greens than usual, so I think it could be a function of that a little bit. If your proximity is off when you're in close, you're much more likely to 3-putt. Obviously, on these greens, you're not necessarily having a wedge in with a chip in with a bad approach shot. You're probably just having a really long putt, which is not ideal.
Yeah, and these greens can be tricky, but I did notice that these are some of the easiest greens to hit. There's just barely any strokes gained around the green to be had here. Maybe on the par 5s, of course, maybe if you're trying to go for it in 2. But yeah, found very similar things. So besides the 2, before we get into some of the players that kind of fit our mold here, any other stats that we should be looking at in conjunction with the strokes gained approach and the short proximity or wedge proximity?
The one thing that kind of jumped out to me just looking at the way that the course plays, par 4 scoring under 450. So you take a look at how the course is played over the past few years, and there were 8 holes that played under par, and 4 of them fit this criteria here, and then it's like the par 5s, which are obviously going to play under par at most places.
Yep.
But then on top of that, 3 of the 7 more difficult holes on the course are also in this yardage range, so you figure you're targeting guys who are going to be able to keep pace on the easier holes and also maybe pick up a stroke where guys are losing strokes on the harder parts of the course.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I tend to leave out par 4 scoring in specific distances, so certainly something that I would love to incorporate. So let's start there. If you don't mind, then we can move into my other 2. What were some of the guys that kind of hit it off in that par 4 scoring under 450 to you this week?
So considering the time of year we're at, I typically look for a longer time frame for the stats, just because it's kind of hit or miss who's played in the fall, who hasn't. So I'm really looking for more of like I guess you would call it like a talent perspective over like a recent form kind of deal.
Sure.
So for me, Brandt Snedeker at 9,200 is in the top 10 in both 350 to 400 and 400 to 450 scoring. So that jumped out to me. And we saw him last week play pretty well. He was 17th last week.
And do you find, and again, this is not ownership. Certainly, Matt does his own ownership projections, and of course, we have me here at Osmo, and they can certainly provide a leg. But don't you feel like when Brandt Snedeker's above 9K in a field like this, no one ever wants to own him?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's and especially this week, like there's guys that we know, right? It's not like it's not a fall swing event that we're like
used to.
We're getting like these odd names at 10K, like.
Yeah, Joaquin Neiman is 11.5. Yeah. It's a much stronger field. Yeah, much stronger field this week goes to that too. All right, so Snedeker, I think that's a really good one there. Any others that kind of flashed out to you?
Webb Simpson is another guy who historically has done well in these types of holes. We obviously haven't seen him in the fall just yet, but since in his 11 starts since the Masters, he's only played par fours over par 3 times. So he's not going to lose you a ton of strokes on these par fours.
Wow, so that's obviously in each tournament after the Masters, he's only played the total of the par fours over par 3 times. Am I understanding that right? Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty darn good. So some top end guys there that certainly look to excel in that price category. How about anybody a little cheaper that you found?
Brian Harman actually at 7,800 really kind of pops off the page in par 4 scoring in general. Since when they were in like Detroit, he's had 8 starts and has only been over par twice. And he's had a couple performances where he's like 9 under on the par 4s, 7 under on the par 4s for the week. So definitely scoring well in that regard. And he has 2 top 15s over the past few weeks.
Yeah, great putter too. One of the best putters on tour, which obviously can help you in any tournament if you get hot with it. So 3 great names there right off the top. So definitely something to look forward to. We're at about the 8-minute mark, so we got about, I'd say, another minute and a half, 2 minutes to chat about some of the guys that I've found from the proximity numbers and the strokes gain numbers of last week. So first and foremost, the strokes gained on the approach, I don't think it's any surprise at this point for you and I to see Colin Morikawa right near the top. I mean, the guy is he's so consistent. Do you think we're going to see some type of regression, or did we already see it with him? He came in 3rd last week, right behind Adam Hadwin for the week in terms of strokes gained on the approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of seeing who this guy is. Like, he's just really good. Like, there's no way around it. Like, we have no reason to think that this is going to go, totally sideways in a way that, we wouldn't expect. A random bad round here and there is going to happen, but
yep.
I think this is who he is.
Yeah, me too. And along with being second in the field of people who made the cut for strokes gained on the approach, he was also second in the field in proximity from 50 to 125 yards. 13 attempts last week. Average proximity was about 12 feet, so pretty darn good right there. Another guy that stuck out to me, who is a form golfer, I've talked about a bit in the past, and when I say a form golfer, it just seems like when he gets in form, it takes him a while to get out of it. And I'm talking about Ches Reavie. Reavie, another good week with his irons. Had a bad Sunday, and that tanked him down the leaderboard. But prior to that, he had a pretty good week going. He entered the final round, I think only a couple back. He came in 4th in proximity from 50 to 125 yards. Anything else you want to add on Ches Reavie that I may have missed?
I had Ches for both of these too, and he's had 5 straight made cuts now, and he hasn't struck it well and putted well in the same week yet. So that's definitely coming at some point, and I like him quite a bit.
Yeah, it seems like it is, and we saw it all come together in the Travelers back in June for his first win, I think, on the PGA Tour. First win in quite a while. I think it was ever. But and in any case, so those guys, a little expensive again as we come off the top. But now I'll give you two names that I want to see if popped out at you at all. Cam Percy obviously had the top 10 last week, and I found in both of those. But the other one is Mark Homeless Hubbard, and if you don't follow him on Twitter, it is Homeless Hubs. I'm not making that up. That is not like me doing that. That is his own nickname for himself. He's been playing some pretty good golf, and again, top 5 in proximity, 50 to 125 yards last week. Only 7 attempts, though. He doesn't hit it as far, which is likely why he didn't get as many. Cam Percy or Mark Hubbard stick out to you?
Yeah, Hubbard's interesting because he's been finding ways to score, even though he hasn't necessarily hit a ton of greens over his past 3 starts. So yeah, he's an interesting name, and 6,400, you can't get much better than that.
No, certainly not. And how about, we'll end on this name. It's a name that continues to creep up and pop up, and DK just doesn't really want to price him that high. He had a really good season last year. For his, I'll call it inaugural season. He had played a couple of tournaments before, but I'm talking about Roger Sloane. Roger Sloane, 10th last week, average of 15.7 proximity from 50 to 125 yards in 17 attempts. So that's, of course, a pretty good number there. And then he added in on the strokes gained approach, just about only about 1.2 for the week. So obviously might have struggled other places. But how about Roger Sloane? Any interest there?
Yeah, I mean, he's made, 7 of his last 8 cuts. Every time he's gotten an opportunity, it seems like he takes advantage of it. So, yeah, I could get on board with him. I think him and Hubbard, you could basically do whatever else you want in the lineup, right?
Yeah, if you're playing, a GPP, I don't know if I would go as far to play him in cash, but I guess you never know with their approach games as well as they are, and obviously playing them in cash the last 2 or 3 weeks would have worked out really well for anybody because they made it through the cut easily and their salary flexibility. So certainly a lot to be had there. So, well, Matt, thanks so much for coming on for this little segment. I like to try and keep my pods short and sweet for consumption purposes, but hope to have you back on pretty regularly in this segment here if you're good with it.
Yeah, for sure.
And, of course, you can find him on Twitter, at MattJonesTFR. Puts out some great content. Ownership projections are great. Golf stuff is awesome. Football stuff is in full swing, as you mentioned. So, Matt, thanks a lot for coming on this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.